The bullet shattered the window of the law office just as Sophia Finnegan reached for the brass doorknob, sending glass fragments showering across her black morning dress like deadly rain. She stumbled backward into the dusty Kansas street, her heart hammering against her ribs as a second shot rang out, splintering the wooden frame where her head had been moments before. "Get down!" A man's voice barked from somewhere to her left, and before Sophia could process the command, strong arms wrapped around her waist and pulled her behind a water trough. She found herself pressed against a broad chest, staring up into the most startling gray eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face beneath the brim of a worn Stetson. "Are you hurt?" the stranger asked, his voice rough but genuinely concerned. His hands moved quickly, checking her arms and shoulders for injury with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to violence. "No, I do not think so," Sophia managed, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to steady it. Her ears rang from the gunshots, and her whole body shook with adrenaline. "Who would shoot at me?" The man's jaw tightened as he peered over the water trough toward the second-story window across the street, where smoke still drifted from a rifle barrel. "Someone who does not want you walking into that lawyer's office, I would wager." He pulled a revolver from his holster with smooth, efficient movements. "Stay down." But the shooter was already gone, the window now empty save for the curtain fluttering in the hot July breeze. The year was 1882, and Lyndon, Kansas was supposed to be a peaceful town, far removed from the lawlessness that had plagued Dodge City and Abilene in years past. Sophia had thought she would be safe here, returning to settle her father's estate after his sudden death 3 weeks prior. She had been so terribly wrong. The cowboy holstered his weapon and turned back to her, offering his hand. "Quinn Thornton, madam. I think you had better tell me what is going on." Sophia accepted his help, rising on unsteady legs. Her traveling bag had fallen in the street, its contents scattered across the packed earth. Quinn moved to gather her belongings, his movements calm and unhurried, despite the violence that had just erupted. She watched him, taking in the details. Tall, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a lean, muscular build that spoke of years spent working cattle. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots scuffed from hard use. A working cowboy, then, not a gunslinger or gambler. "I am Sophia Finnegan," she said, accepting her bag from him with murmured thanks. "My father, Thomas Finnegan, died last month. He owned a ranch outside of town, the Double F. I received a telegram from his lawyer, Mr. Pemberton, asking me to come settle the estate. I arrived on this morning's train from St. Louis." Quinn's expression darkened. "Thomas Finnegan was your father? I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Finnegan. He was a good man, fair and honest. The whole county respected him." "You knew him?" "I worked for him the past 2 summers, helping with the cattle drives. Your father gave me my first real job when I was barely 18 and new to Kansas. I owe him a great deal." Quinn glanced back at the lawyer's office, then at the now empty window across the street. "Did your father have any enemies? Anyone who might want to keep you from claiming your inheritance?" Sophia's stomach clenched. "My uncle, possibly. My father's younger brother, Victor Finnegan, and his wife, Margaret. They wrote to me after the funeral, suggesting it would be better if I stayed in St. Louis, that the ranch was no place for an unmarried woman. But I never imagined they would resort to violence." "Violence is usually a last resort when legal means fail," Quinn said grimly. He placed a protective hand on the small of her back, guiding her away from the exposed street. "Come on, we need to get you somewhere safe, and then we need to talk to Sheriff Morrison about what just happened." They found the sheriff at his office 2 blocks away, a portly man in his 50s with a salt-and-pepper mustache and a star pinned to his vest. He listened to their account with a deepening frown, occasionally glancing at Sophia with something that looked uncomfortably like pity. "That is a serious accusation, Miss Finnegan," Sheriff Morrison said slowly. "Your Uncle Victor is a respected member of this community. He sits on the town council. Are you certain someone was actually shooting at you and not just engaging in some foolish celebration?" Sophia felt her temper flare. "I'm quite certain, Sheriff. The bullets came through the window of Mr. Pemberton's office just as I was about to enter. That strikes me as rather deliberate." "I saw the smoke from the shooter's position," Quinn added, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Second-story window of the boarding house across from the law office. Someone was lying in wait." The sheriff sighed and hauled himself to his feet. "All right, I will go talk to Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house, see who was renting that room this morning. But Miss Finnegan, I would strongly suggest you keep a low profile until we sort this out. Maybe stay at the hotel. Do not go wandering around town alone." "I need to see Mr. Pemberton," Sophia insisted. "That is why I came to Lyndon. My father's affairs must be settled." "I will send word to him. Ask him to come to you at the hotel," the sheriff said. "Just give me a few hours to investigate. In the meantime, you would do well to have someone watching your back. Quinn here seems capable enough." Quinn straightened, clearly about to protest, but Sophia spoke first. "I cannot ask Mr. Thornton to put himself at risk on my behalf. We have only just met." "I'm offering, Miss Finnegan," Quinn said quietly. His gray eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Your father helped me when I needed it most. The least I can do is make sure his daughter stays safe. Besides, if your uncle is trying to steal your inheritance, that is wrong. Plain and simple wrong. You should get what is rightfully yours." Something in his voice, the absolute conviction behind those words, made Sophia's decision for her. She nodded. "Then I accept your help, Mr. Thornton. Thank you." They left the sheriff's office together, Quinn keeping himself between Sophia and the street, his hand never far from his revolver. The Lyndon Hotel was a modest 3-story building at the end of Main Street, with a painted sign that had faded in the Kansas sun. The proprietor, a thin woman with sharp features and shrewd eyes, took Sophia's money and handed over a key to a second-floor room without comment. "I will be right next door," Quinn said as they climbed the stairs. "Keep your door locked. Do not open it for anyone except me or the sheriff." Sophia paused at her door, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. The journey from St. Louis had taken 3 days, and she had barely slept on the train, too anxious about what awaited her in Lyndon. Now someone had tried to kill her, and she was trusting her safety to a man she had known for less than an hour. It was madness, but something about Quinn Thornton made her feel safer than she had since receiving the telegram about her father's death. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked softly. "You barely know me." Quinn was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Your father saw something in me that no one else did. When I came to Kansas, I was angry and lost, running from a past I wanted to forget. Thomas gave me honest work and treated me with respect. He taught me that a man's character matters more than his history. I cannot repay him now, but I can make sure his daughter gets what she deserves. That has to count for something." His words, simple and heartfelt, brought unexpected tears to Sophia's eyes. She blinked them back quickly. "My father was a good judge of character. If he trusted you, then I will too." After Quinn left to secure his own room, Sophia sank onto the bed and allowed herself a moment of weakness. She pressed her face into her hands and let the tears come, grief and fear and exhaustion washing over her in equal measure. Her father had been her anchor, her protector, the one person in the world who loved her unconditionally. They had been close despite the distance, writing letters every week, sharing their thoughts and dreams. He had encouraged her interest in literature and mathematics, paid for her education at a finishing school in St. Louis, never once suggesting she should be less than she was capable of being. And now he was gone, and his brother was apparently willing to kill to steal what Thomas had built. It was too much to process, too painful to fully comprehend. A soft knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Finnegan, it is Quinn. Mr. Pemberton is here." Sophia quickly dried her eyes and smoothed her dress before opening the door. Quinn stood in the hallway with an elderly gentleman in a fine suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Mr. Pemberton had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, and his handshake was warm despite the gravity of the situation. "My dear Miss Finnegan, I am so terribly sorry about what happened this morning," the lawyer said as they settled in her small room, Quinn standing guard by the door. "Sheriff Morrison informed me of the shooting. This is utterly unacceptable." "Do you know who is behind it?" Sophia asked. Mr. Pemberton's expression grew troubled. "I have my suspicions, but no proof. Your father's will is quite clear. You inherit everything. The ranch, the cattle, all of his savings and investments. It amounts to a considerable fortune, nearly $50,000 when everything is accounted for." Sophia gasped. She had known her father was successful, but she had never imagined such wealth. $50,000? Your father was an excellent businessman and a careful investor. He wanted to ensure you would be well provided for. Mr. Pemberton opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick sheaf of papers. However, your Uncle Victor has contested the will. He claims that your father was not of sound mind when he drafted it last year, that he was ill and easily influenced. Victor is arguing that as Thomas's only living brother, he should inherit the estate, or at the very least, it should be divided between you and him. That is absurd, Sophia said hotly. My father was sharp as a tack. He wrote to me every week up until his death. There was nothing wrong with his mind. I know that, and you know that. But Victor has hired a lawyer from Kansas City who is quite skilled at twisting facts. They are requesting a hearing before Judge Harrison next week to determine the will's validity. Mr. Pemberton's voice dropped. And now this shooting. If something were to happen to you before that hearing, Victor would have a much stronger claim to the estate. The implication hung heavy in the air. Quinn's jaw tightened and he shifted his weight, ready for action. Then we need to make sure nothing happens to Miss Finnegan. What about the ranch? Is anyone there now? Your father's foreman, Jake Carson, is managing things with the help of a few ranch hands. They are good men, loyal to Thomas's memory. But Victor's been making overtures, suggesting he should take over management until the legal matters are settled. So far, Jake has refused, but the pressure is mounting. Sophia felt a surge of determination cutting through her fear. I want to go to the ranch. If it is mine, I should be there. I should meet the men who worked for my father and see what he built. Miss Finnegan, that might not be wise, Mr. Pemberton protested. If Victor is behind the shooting, the ranch could be dangerous. Staying in town nearly got her killed this morning, Quinn pointed out. At least at the ranch. We will be on friendly ground with people we can trust. And it is harder to ambush someone on open range than in a town full of hiding spots. Mr. Pemberton looked between them, then sighed in resignation. Very well, but please, both of you, be careful. I will continue preparing for the hearing and gathering evidence to support the will's validity. In the meantime, try to stay alive. After the lawyer departed, Sophia began repacking her bag with the few belongings she had brought from St. Louis. Quinn watched from the doorway, his expression thoughtful. You do not have to do this, he said quietly. You could take what money you have and go back to St. Louis, start over somewhere safe. $50,000 is a fortune, but it is not worth your life. Sophia straightened, meeting his gaze with fierce determination. My father spent 30 years building that ranch. He poured his heart and soul into it, and he wanted me to have it. I will not let his greedy brother steal what is rightfully mine just because I am a woman. I may not know much about running a cattle ranch, but I can learn, and I will not be frightened away by threats and violence. A slow smile spread across Quinn's face, transforming his serious features. Your father would be proud of you. That's exactly the kind of stubborn determination he had. Did you know him well? Sophia asked, suddenly hungry for any information about her father's life in Kansas. They had written often, but letters could only convey so much. Well enough, Quinn said. He leaned against the door frame, his posture relaxing slightly. He was fair but firm, expected hard work but paid good wages. He treated everyone with respect, from the newest ranch hand to the men who had worked for him for years. And he talked about you constantly. He kept your letters in his shirt pocket, would read them during breaks in the work. We all knew about the smart, beautiful daughter back in St. Louis who was going to make something of herself. Heat crept into Sophia's cheeks at the compliment, both from Quinn's words and from knowing her father had spoken so proudly of her. I wish I'd visited more. I kept meaning to come see the ranch, but there was always some excuse. School or work, or the timing was not right. And now? He understood, Quinn said gently. He knew you had your own life to build. That is what parents want for their children, is it not? For them to spread their wings and fly. They set out for the Double F Ranch just after noon. Riding in a wagon Quinn borrowed from the livery stable. Sophia had little experience with horses, and Quinn insisted the 7-mile journey would be easier in the wagon than attempting to teach her to ride. The Kansas landscape rolled past them in waves of golden prairie grass, broken occasionally by stands of cottonwood trees and meandering creeks. The summer heat was intense, the sun beating down from a cloudless sky. But there was a stark beauty to the land that Sophia found herself appreciating despite the circumstances. Quinn handled the horses with easy competence, his attention constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign of danger. He had strapped on a second gun before they left town, and a rifle lay within easy reach on the wagon seat. Sophia found his caution both reassuring and unsettling. "Tell me about Victor," Quinn said as they rattled along the rutted road. "What is he like?" Sophia gathered her thoughts, trying to be fair despite her anger. "He's my father's younger brother by 5 years. They were never particularly close from what I understand. Victor always felt like he lived in my father's shadow. Thomas was the one who inherited the family farm back in Ohio, who made all the right decisions, who everyone respected. Victor was charming and handsome, but never quite managed to succeed at anything he tried. He moved to Kansas about 10 years ago with his wife Margaret, started a small ranch near Lyndon, but it never prospered the way my father's did. Jealousy is a powerful motive," Quinn observed. "Victor always acted friendly toward me when I was young, but there was something false about it, like he was performing the role of the doting uncle rather than actually caring. Margaret was worse. She would make little comments about my appearance or my manners, always wrapped in false concern. When my mother died 8 years ago, Margaret suggested my father should send me away to boarding school, that it was not proper for me to be raised by a widower. My father refused. Good for him." They fell into comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the steady clop of horse hooves. Sophia found herself studying Quinn's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes never stopped moving, always watching. He was a handsome man, she realized, though his looks were rough and unrefined compared to the gentleman she had known in St. Louis. There was something elemental about him, something real and solid that she found deeply attractive. The thought startled her. She had no business thinking such things about a man she had just met, especially under these circumstances. Yet she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, the sense that Quinn Thornton was exactly the kind of man she could trust with her life. The Double F Ranch came into view as they crested a low hill, and Sophia's breath caught in her throat. A sprawling house sat in a valley carved by a wide creek, surrounded by barns, corrals, and outbuildings. Cattle dotted the hillsides beyond, hundreds of them grazing peacefully. It was bigger than she had imagined, more prosperous and well-maintained. "Your father built something impressive," Quinn said quietly. "This is one of the finest operations in eastern Kansas." As they approached, several men emerged from the barn, hands moving instinctively toward their gun belts before they recognized Quinn. A stocky man with graying hair and a weathered face stepped forward, his expression breaking into a relieved smile. "Quinn Thornton, good to see you, son. We heard you were working up in Nebraska this summer." The man's gaze shifted to Sophia, and his smile faded into something more solemn. "And you must be Miss Finnegan. I am Jake Carson, your father's foreman. I'm so sorry for your loss, miss. Thomas was a good man and a good boss. We all miss him something fierce." Sophia climbed down from the wagon, accepting Jake's handshake. "Thank you, Mr. Carson. My father spoke very highly of you in his letters. I'm glad to finally meet you." Jake introduced the other hands. A young Mexican man named Miguel, a grizzled cowboy called Red for his shock of russet hair, and a quiet Native American man named Joseph. They all nodded respectfully to Sophia, though she could see the questions in their eyes. What would this city woman do with a cattle ranch? "We need to talk," Quinn said to Jake, his tone serious. "Someone tried to kill Miss Finnegan this morning in town." Jake's expression darkened. "Victor?" "That would be our guess. The sheriff is investigating, but we thought it was safer for Miss Finnegan to be here rather than in town." "You thought right." Jake gestured toward the house. "Come on, let us get you settled and we can figure out what to do next." The inside of the ranch house was spacious and comfortable, with solid furniture and warm touches that spoke of a man who had built a home, not just a place to sleep. Sophia moved through the rooms slowly, trailing her fingers over surfaces that her father's hands had touched, seeing the books he had read, the chair where he had sat in the evenings. It felt both familiar and foreign, like visiting a version of her father she had never fully known. A photograph on the mantel caught her attention, she and her father taken 5 years ago during her last visit to Kansas. She'd been 18 then, fresh-faced and full of dreams about the future. Her father stood beside her, tall and strong, pride evident in his expression. Sophia picked up the frame with trembling hands. "He kept that where he could see it every day," Jake said quietly from the doorway. "Would tell anyone who asked that you were his greatest accomplishment." Tears blurred Sophia's vision. I should have come back sooner. He knew you loved him, miss. That was what mattered. Over the next hour, they discussed the situation. Jake confirmed that Victor had been pressuring him to acknowledge Victor's authority over the ranch, suggesting that it was improper for a woman to own such a property and that the hands should look to Victor for guidance. Several men from Victor's smaller ranch had been seen riding near the Double F's boundaries, ostensibly checking fences, but clearly surveying the property. He is building toward something, Jake said grimly. I just do not know what. The hearing is in 1 week, Sophia said. If his legal challenge fails and I am confirmed as the rightful owner, what will he do? Nothing good, Quinn said. He had been standing by the window watching the approach to the ranch, but now he turned to face them. Men like Victor do not give up easily, especially when this much money is at stake. We need to be ready for trouble. You think he will try something more direct? Jake asked. I think he will do whatever it takes to get what he wants. The shooting this morning was a warning shot, maybe an attempt to scare Miss Finnegan away. When that does not work, he will escalate. Sophia felt a chill despite the summer heat. So what do we do? Quinn's gray eyes met hers, hard and determined. We make sure you are protected every minute. We prepare for the hearing and gather every piece of evidence we can that the will is legitimate, and we watch for Victor's next move. I have something that might help, Jake said. He left the room and returned a moment later with a leather journal. Your father kept detailed records of everything: business transactions, personal thoughts, observations about people and events. He was writing in this just days before he died. If anyone questions his state of mind, this should prove he was sharp as ever. Sophia took the journal carefully, opening it to see her father's familiar handwriting. The entries were detailed and thoughtful, discussing ranch business, market prices, weather patterns, and personal reflections. On one of the last pages, dated 2 weeks before his death, he had written about his hopes for Sophia's future. My daughter has her mother's kindness and my stubborn determination, he had penned in his neat script. She is stronger than she knows, smarter than most of the fools in this county. When the time comes, she will know what to do with everything I have built. She will not let anyone push her around or steal what is rightfully hers. I have no doubts about leaving the Double F in her hands. Fresh tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. Thank you for saving this. That is evidence for the hearing, Quinn said, but it is also proof that your father knew exactly what he was doing. No one can claim he was confused or incompetent when he wrote those words. That evening, Sophia insisted on helping prepare dinner, despite the men's protests that she was the owner and should be waited on. She had learned to cook during her time in St. Louis, and she found the familiar rhythm of chopping vegetables and stirring pots soothing after the day's chaos. Quinn helped her, moving around the kitchen with surprising ease. You cook? She asked, amused. A man who works cattle learns to fend for himself, Quinn replied, deftly slicing potatoes. Besides, my mother made sure all her children knew how to cook, boys and girls alike. She said there was no excuse for helplessness. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Quinn's expression grew distant. She died when I was 16. Fever took her in the winter. My father followed 6 months later. Grief, the doctor said, though I think it was more that he just gave up without her. I'm sorry. That must have been terrible. It was a long time ago. But Sophia could hear the pain still lingering in his voice, the wound that never quite healed. She understood that kind of loss now, the way it hollowed you out and changed the shape of your world. They ate dinner together at the long table in the ranch house kitchen, all 6 of them, Sophia, Quinn, Jake, and the 3 ranch hands. The men were initially stiff and formal in her presence, but Sophia asked questions about the ranch and their work, genuinely interested in understanding the operation her father had built. Gradually, they relaxed, and conversation flowed more naturally. Miguel told her about the new calves born that spring, nearly 200 healthy animals that would be ready for market in a couple of years. Red described the water management system Thomas had designed, a series of irrigation channels that kept the pastures green even during dry summers. Joseph, speaking quietly, explained the importance of managing the grass growth and preventing overgrazing. Your father understood that the land had to be respected, Joseph said. He did not just take from it, he worked with it, made sure it could sustain the cattle and the wildlife both. That is rare. Sophia felt pride swelling in her chest. Her father had been more than just a successful rancher. He had been a steward of the land, a man who thought beyond immediate profit to long-term sustainability. She wanted to honor that legacy, to prove herself worthy of what he had built. After dinner, Quinn walked with her down to the creek that ran through the property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The air had cooled slightly, and the sound of running water was peaceful. They sat on a fallen log near the bank, watching the light fade. "What will you do if you win the hearing?" Quinn asked. "Will you stay here or sell the ranch?" Sophia considered the question carefully. 24 hours ago, she would have said she would sell. What did she know about running a ranch? But now, having seen the land and met the men who worked it, having felt her father's presence in every corner of the property, she was not so sure. "I think I want to try," she said slowly. "I know I have much to learn, but Jake and the others could teach me. And this place, it feels like home in a way St. Louis never did. Does that sound foolish?" "No," Quinn said quietly. "It sounds like you are listening to your heart." She looked at him, struck again by how comfortable she felt in his presence. It should have been awkward being alone with a man she barely knew, but Quinn made her feel safe and seen in ways she could not quite explain. "Why did you leave Nebraska?" she asked. "Jake seemed surprised to see you back in Kansas so early in the season." Quinn was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the water. "I heard about your father's death. One of the hands I worked with had a brother in Lyndon who sent word. I knew Thomas would not want you facing this alone, so I came back to help however I could." He turned to meet her gaze. "I did not expect to find someone shooting at you the moment I arrived in town." "That was fortunate timing," Sophia said softly, "if you had not been there. But I was, and I will keep being there until this is settled and you are safe." The intensity in his voice made her heart race. There was something happening between them, something powerful and undeniable. She knew she should be cautious, should keep her distance until the crisis with Victor was resolved. But she could not help the way she felt drawn to this man, could not deny the connection sparking between them. "Quinn," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. He stood abruptly, offering his hand. "We should get back. It will be dark soon, and I want everyone inside where we can keep watch." The moment passed, but Sophia felt its echo as they walked back to the ranch house together. Something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings neither was quite ready to voice. The next 3 days passed in a tense but productive routine. Sophia spent her mornings with Jake, learning the business side of ranch management, understanding the ledgers, reviewing contracts, discussing market prices and future planning. In the afternoons, she rode out with the men, learning to sit a horse properly despite her initial nervousness. Miguel proved to be a patient teacher, and by the 3rd day, Sophia could manage a gentle trot without losing her seat. Quinn was constantly present, watching over her with a vigilance that never wavered. He slept on a bedroll outside her door, was always within sight during the day, and rode beside her whenever she left the immediate ranch grounds. Sophia should have found his constant presence stifling, but instead, she found it reassuring. More than that, she found herself looking forward to their conversations, the moments when they were alone and could talk freely. She learned about his past in fragments. He had grown up in Missouri, the 3rd of 5 children. After his parents died, he had drifted west working various jobs: farmhand, freight hauler, occasional deputy when towns needed extra help. He had been in a few scrapes with the law himself, nothing serious but enough to give him a reputation as someone who could handle trouble. That was what had brought him to Kansas 3 years ago, looking for steady work and a chance to build something resembling a normal life. "Your father gave me that chance," Quinn told her as they mended a section of fence on the 4th day. "He looked past my rough edges and saw someone worth investing in. I will never forget that." Sophia hammered a nail into the fence post, then stepped back to examine her work. Not perfect, but solid. He had good instincts about people. He did, which is why he trusted you with all of this. On the evening of the 4th day, Sheriff Morrison rode out to the ranch with news. He looked tired and frustrated as he dismounted in the yard. "I found the shooter," he announced without preamble. "Name is Charlie Dawson, a drifter who arrived in Lyndon about a week ago. He was staying at the boarding house, rented that room with a view of the law office." "Where is he now?" Quinn asked. "In the wind. Left town the same day as the shooting, did not even collect the rest of his rent. Mrs. Henderson found this in the room. The sheriff handed over a piece of paper, a telegram that read, "Girl arriving Thursday. Stop her. $500. That does not prove it was Victor, Jake pointed out. No, but I did some checking. The telegram was sent from Victor's ranch. And I talked to a few people who mentioned seeing Charlie Dawson talking with Victor's foreman the day before the shooting." Sheriff Morrison sighed. "Problem is, it's all circumstantial. Victor can claim someone else sent the telegram, that he never met Dawson. Without catching the shooter and getting him to testify, I do not have enough for an arrest." Sophia felt her frustration building. "So Victor gets away with attempting murder?" "For now. But I wanted you to know I'm keeping an eye on him. If he tries anything else, I will be ready." The sheriff's expression softened. "How are you holding up, Miss Finnegan?" "I am managing, Sheriff. Everyone here has been very helpful." After the sheriff left, the mood at the ranch was somber. They all knew Victor was behind the shooting, but knowing and proving were two different things. And with the hearing only 3 days away, tensions were mounting. That night, Sophia found sleep elusive. She lay in her father's bed, which had become her bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had happened. A soft knock on her door made her sit up. "Miss Finnegan? It is Quinn. I heard you moving around. Is everything all right?" She opened the door, finding him fully dressed despite the late hour, his hand resting on his gun belt. "I cannot sleep. Too much on my mind." "Come sit with me," he said, gesturing toward the porch. "Sometimes it helps to be outside." They settled on the porch steps, the night air cool against their skin. Above them, the stars blazed in glorious profusion, undimmed by any city lights. It was breathtaking. "I used to love looking at the stars when I was young," Sophia said quietly. "My father taught me the constellations. He said no matter where we were, we could look up and see the same sky, and that connected us." "He was right," Quinn said. He pointed upward. "There is the Big Dipper, and if you follow those two stars, they point to Polaris, the North Star. Travelers have used it to find their way home for thousands of years." They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders nearly touching, sharing the quiet of the night. After a while, Quinn spoke again. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When I heard about your father's death, part of why I came back was because I wanted to meet you. Thomas talked about you so much that I felt like I knew you, and I was curious if you were really as remarkable as he claimed." Quinn turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious in the moonlight. "You are. You are braver than he even knew. The way you have handled all of this, the threats and the fear and the uncertainty, most people would have run. But you are standing your ground, fighting for what is yours. That takes real courage." Sophia's breath caught. "I am terrified most of the time. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear." She knew she should move away, should maintain proper distance. But instead, she found herself leaning closer, drawn by the warmth of his presence and the steady strength he radiated. "Quinn, I need to tell you something too. These past few days, having you here, I've felt, I do not know how to describe it. Safe, yes, but more than that. I feel like I can be myself around you, like I do not have to pretend or perform." "I know what you mean," he said softly. His hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I have not felt this connected to someone in a long time, maybe ever." They were crossing a line, Sophia knew, moving from strangers thrown together by circumstance into something more intentional, more dangerous. But she could not bring herself to care about propriety or caution. Quinn Thornton had become important to her in ways that had nothing to do with her safety and everything to do with her heart. "What happens after the hearing?" she asked. "When this is all over?" "I suppose that depends on what you want. I could stay on here at the Double F if you need another hand. Or if you decide to sell, I will help you get settled wherever you want to go." He squeezed her hand gently. "But I'm not walking away from you, Sophia. Not unless you ask me to." Her name on his lips without the formal Miss Finnegan sent a thrill through her. "I do not want you to go. Then I will stay." The hearing was set for 10 o'clock on Monday morning in Judge Harrison's courtroom in Lyndon. Sophia dressed carefully that morning, choosing a somber dark blue dress that was both respectable and businesslike. Her hair was pinned up neatly, and she wore the cameo brooch her father had given her on her 20th birthday. She wanted to look capable and composed, not like a flighty girl who could be dismissed or intimidated. Quinn drove her into town in the wagon, with Jake and the others riding alongside as both escort and show of support. They made an impressive sight, and Sophia drew strength from their presence. These men had worked for her father and now chose to stand with her. That meant something. The courthouse was already crowded when they arrived. Sophia spotted Victor and Margaret immediately, sitting at the front with their lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit. Victor was in his late 40s, still handsome in a dissolute way, with thinning hair and the ruddy complexion of a man who drank too much. Margaret was thin and pinched, her mouth set in a permanent expression of displeasure. Both of them watched Sophia enter with expressions of barely concealed hostility. Mr. Pemberton met them at the door, looking relieved. "Miss Finnegan, I am glad you made it safely. I have all of our evidence prepared. The journal was particularly helpful, thank you." They took their seats, Quinn sitting directly behind Sophia, close enough that she could feel his solid presence at her back. Judge Harrison entered, a stern-looking man in his 60s with bushy white eyebrows and a no-nonsense demeanor. "This hearing will come to order," the judge announced, banging his gavel. "We are here to determine the validity of the last will and testament of Thomas Finnegan, deceased. Mr. Blackwell, you represent the contesters. Please present your case." Victor's lawyer stood, smoothing his jacket. "Your Honor, my clients contest this will on the grounds that Thomas Finnegan was not of sound mind when he drafted it. They present evidence that Mr. Finnegan was suffering from illness in his final year, that he was subject to bouts of confusion and memory loss, and that he was unduly influenced by certain parties to leave his entire estate to his daughter, Miss Sophia Finnegan, rather than dividing it fairly among his surviving family members." What followed was an hour of testimony designed to paint Thomas Finnegan as a sick, confused old man who did not understand what he was doing. Victor took the stand and lied smoothly, describing visits where his brother seemed forgetful and disoriented. Margaret backed up his claims, adding tearful assertions that it broke her heart to see Thomas in such decline. Sophia's hands clenched into fists as she listened to them slander her father's memory. She felt Quinn's hand on her shoulder, a gentle reminder to stay calm. Mr. Pemberton would have his turn. When the defense finally rested, Mr. Pemberton stood with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that Thomas Finnegan was in full possession of his faculties right up until his sudden death from a heart condition. We have numerous witnesses who interacted with him regularly and can attest to his sharp mind and clear decision-making. We also have documentary evidence in the form of Mr. Finnegan's detailed journals, maintained up until days before his death." Jake took the stand first, describing his daily interactions with Thomas, the complex business decisions they discussed, the long-term planning they engaged in. "Thomas Finnegan was the sharpest man I ever worked for," Jake testified firmly. "There was nothing wrong with his mind. He knew exactly what he was doing every single day." Miguel, Red, and Joseph each provided similar testimony. Then, Mr. Pemberton called Dr. Harrington, the physician who had treated Thomas for minor ailments over the years. "Did you ever observe any signs of mental decline or confusion in Mr. Finnegan?" Mr. Pemberton asked. "Absolutely not," Dr. Harrington replied. "I saw Thomas just 2 weeks before his death for a routine checkup. His mind was clear, his memory excellent. We discussed politics, literature, and ranch management. He was as mentally acute as any man I have treated." Finally, Mr. Pemberton introduced Thomas's journal, reading aloud several entries that demonstrated clear, logical thinking and detailed planning. When he reached the passage about Sophia, about Thomas's confidence in his daughter's ability to manage the ranch, there was not a dry eye on their side of the courtroom. "Your Honor," Mr. Pemberton concluded, "the evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that Thomas Finnegan was of sound mind when he made his will. The contesters have provided only their own self-serving testimony, while we have presented multiple credible witnesses and documentary proof. This should be upheld as written." Judge Harrison called a brief recess to review the evidence. During the wait, Victor approached Sophia, his expression venomous. "You think you have won," he hissed. "But this is not over. That ranch should have been mine. Thomas was my brother." "And yet he chose to leave everything to me," Sophia replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Perhaps you should ask yourself why." Quinn stepped between them, his presence a clear warning. "Back away, Victor." Who are you to tell me anything? Some hired gun she brought in to intimidate people. I'm someone who cares about the truth, and the truth is, you are trying to steal from your own niece. Thomas saw right through you, and so does everyone else. Victor's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, the bailiff called them back. Judge Harrison had made his decision. I have reviewed all the evidence presented, the judge announced. While I appreciate the contestants' concern for their family member, I find their claims unsubstantiated. The multiple credible witnesses and documentary evidence clearly demonstrate that Thomas Finnegan was of sound mind when he drafted his will. Furthermore, the journal entries show thoughtful, detailed planning and a clear understanding of his wishes. This court finds the will to be valid as written. Miss Sophia Finnegan is the sole heir to her father's estate. Relief crashed over Sophia like a wave. She heard Quinn's quiet exhalation of triumph behind her, felt Mr. Pemberton's congratulatory handshake. Across the aisle, Victor and Margaret looked murderous. As they filed out of the courtroom, Sophia caught the full force of her uncle's hatred in his glare. She knew with certainty that this was not over, that he would not simply accept defeat. But she had won the first battle, and that gave her hope for the war. They returned to the ranch in high spirits, celebrating the victory with a special dinner. Sophia opened a bottle of her father's best whiskey, and they toasted to justice and truth. For the first time since arriving in Kansas, she allowed herself to relax slightly, to believe that maybe everything would work out. She should have known better. The attack came just after midnight. Sophia woke to the sound of gunfire and shouting. She stumbled out of bed, disoriented and terrified, just as Quinn burst through her door. "Get down!" he shouted, pushing her to the floor as a bullet shattered her window. "Stay low and stay quiet." More gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Sophia could hear Jake and the others returning fire, the acrid smell of gunpowder drifting through the house. Quinn crouched by the window, his revolver in hand, trying to get a count of their attackers. 6, maybe 8 men, he said grimly. They have us surrounded. Victor? Sophia breathed. Has to be. Quinn fired twice out the window, and someone screamed in pain. He is not going to let the ranch go without a fight. The siege lasted for nearly an hour, an eternity of terror and chaos. The attackers tried to set fire to the barn, but Miguel and Red managed to put it out before it spread. Joseph took a bullet in the shoulder, but kept fighting. Quinn moved through the house like a ghost, appearing at different windows to fire, and then disappearing before return fire could find him. Finally, in the distance, Sophia heard what she had been praying for, the thunder of horses approaching. Sheriff Morrison and a posse arrived in force, and the attackers scattered, disappearing into the darkness. 3 bodies lay in the yard, men Sophia did not recognize, hired guns almost certainly. The sheriff surveyed the carnage with a grim expression. "Are you all right, Miss Finnegan?" "We are alive," Sophia said, her voice shaking with reaction. "Sheriff, Victor did this. He tried to have us killed." "I know. We caught one of the attackers fleeing. He is singing like a bird, saying Victor hired him and the others to attack the ranch, burn you out, and make it look like you died in the fire." Sheriff Morrison's jaw tightened. "I have men riding to Victor's place right now. He will face justice for this." Quinn put his arm around Sophia's shoulders, and she leaned into him gratefully, too exhausted and overwrought to care about propriety. They had survived, but the cost had been high. The ranch showed signs of damage, and Joseph needed a doctor for his wound. "He won't stop," Sophia said quietly. "Even in jail, he will find a way to keep coming after me." "Then we make sure he stays in jail for a very long time," Quinn said firmly. "Attempted murder, conspiracy, arson, they will lock him away for years." True to the sheriff's word, Victor was arrested that night along with several of his ranch hands who had participated in the attack. Margaret, claiming ignorance of her husband's plans, returned to Ohio in disgrace. The trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming. Victor was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison, a broken man who had gambled everything and lost. In the aftermath, Sophia threw herself into learning the ranch business. With Quinn, Jake, and the others teaching her, she proved to be a quick study. She discovered she had her father's head for numbers and his instinct for reading cattle markets. Within months, she was making decisions with confidence, earning the respect of the ranch hands and other ranchers in the county. Quinn remained at her side through it all, transitioning from protector to partner so naturally that Sophia could not pinpoint the exact moment it happened. He worked the ranch as foreman alongside Jake, but in the evenings, he and Sophia would sit on the porch and talk for hours, sharing their dreams and fears, their hopes for the future. 6 months after the hearing, as winter settled over Kansas, Quinn asked her to marry him. They were riding the range together, checking on the cattle before a snowstorm arrived, when he suddenly reined in his horse and turned to face her. "Sophia, I need to ask you something," he said, his gray eyes intense. "These past months working beside you, seeing you grow into the role your father knew you could fill, I have fallen completely in love with you. You are strong and smart and brave, and you make me want to be a better man. I know I do not have much to offer besides my labor and my devotion, but if you will have me, I would be honored to be your husband." Joy exploded in Sophia's chest. She had known for weeks that she loved him, had been waiting for him to say something, hoping he felt the same overwhelming connection she did. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Quinn, I will marry you. I love you too." He dismounted and lifted her down from her horse, and then they were kissing, cold and snow-forgotten in the heat of their embrace. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "Your father would have approved," he said softly. "He would have wanted you to be happy." "I am happy," Sophia whispered, "happier than I ever thought possible." They married in the spring of 1883, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with Jake, Miguel, Red, Joseph, and a few other friends in attendance. Mr. Pemberton officiated, and Dr. Harrington gave Sophia away in her father's absence. She wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and carried wildflowers picked from the prairie. Quinn promised to love and protect her, to work beside her as an equal partner in all things. Sophia promised to trust and support him, to build a life together based on honesty and respect. They were not just joining their lives, but their dreams, creating something new from the foundation Thomas Finnegan had built. The first year of their marriage was one of hard work and deep happiness. They expanded the ranch operations, adding new breeding stock and improving the grazing lands. Sophia proved to have a talent for negotiation, securing better prices for their cattle than anyone expected. Quinn's experience and instincts complemented her business acumen perfectly, and together they made the Double F more prosperous than ever. In the evenings, they would retreat to the house they now truly shared, cooking dinner together and planning for the future. Quinn taught Sophia to shoot, insisting she needed to be able to defend herself. She taught him to read more fluently, opening up new worlds of literature they could explore together. Their physical relationship was a revelation to Sophia, a passionate discovery of desire and intimacy that deepened their emotional bond. Quinn was patient and tender, teaching her the ways of pleasure with a gentleness that made her love him even more. In his arms, she felt cherished and desired, truly seen in ways she had never experienced. By the fall of 1883, Sophia realized she was pregnant. The news filled them both with wonder and a touch of fear. They were bringing a new life into the world, a child who would inherit not just the ranch, but the legacy of hard work and integrity that Thomas Finnegan had embodied. "What if I am not a good father?" Quinn asked one night, his hand resting on Sophia's still flat belly. "What if I do not know how?" "You will be wonderful," Sophia assured him. "You are kind and patient and good. Our child will be lucky to have you." "Our child will be lucky to have us both," Quinn corrected, kissing her gently. "We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." Their son was born in the spring of 1884, a healthy boy with Quinn's gray eyes and a shock of dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Sophia's father, and the foreman Jake cried openly when they told him. "Duh, Thomas would have loved this," Jake said, holding the baby with surprising gentleness for his work-roughened hands. A grandson to carry on the name. He would have been so proud. Motherhood transformed Sophia in ways she had not anticipated. She discovered wells of fierce protectiveness and tender love she had never known existed. Watching Quinn with their son, seeing the gentle way he held the baby and sang softly to soothe him, made her fall in love with her husband all over again. They hired a woman from town, Mrs. Patterson, to help with the baby in the house, which freed Sophia to continue working the ranch business. She refused to give up her role in managing the Double F, determined to prove that a woman could be both mother and businesswoman. It was exhausting at times, balancing the different demands, but Sophia had never been one to shy away from challenges. The years flowed by in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Young Thomas grew into a bright, curious child who followed his parents around the ranch, asking endless questions and getting into harmless mischief. In 1886, they welcomed a daughter whom they named Clara after Sophia's mother. Clara had Sophia's green eyes and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone she met. The Double F continued to prosper under their joint management. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, market downturns, and difficult negotiations. Through it all, Sophia and Quinn remained united, their partnership strengthened by shared challenges and triumphs. The ranch hands who had known Thomas often remarked that Sophia and Quinn together were even better than Thomas alone, combining the best qualities of both. Quinn never forgot where he had come from. The drifting cowboy Thomas Finnegan had given a chance. He made sure to hire young men who were struggling, giving them the same opportunity for honest work and respect that had changed his life. Several young cowboys passed through the Double F over the years, learning the trade and gaining confidence before moving on to start their own operations. It became a source of pride for Quinn, paying forward the kindness he had received. As their children grew, Sophia taught them the business side of ranching, while Quinn taught them the practical skills. Thomas learned to ride before he could properly walk, showing an early aptitude for working with cattle. Clara preferred the numbers and negotiations, sitting with her mother as Sophia reviewed ledgers and planned sales. "They are going to be unstoppable together," Quinn remarked one evening as they watched their children play in the yard. Thomas was 7 now, Clara 5, both of them already showing signs of the strong partnership their parents modeled. "Just like us," Sophia said, lacing her fingers through Quinn's. They sat together on the porch, the same spot where he had proposed years earlier, watching the sunset paint the Kansas sky in brilliant colors. "Do you ever regret it?" Quinn asked quietly. "Coming back to Kansas, fighting for the ranch, everything that followed?" Sophia turned to look at him, seeing the silver starting to thread through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that came from squinting into the sun for decades. He was even more handsome to her now than he had been at 28, weathered by time and experience into something solid and enduring. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This life, this ranch, our children, you. It is everything I never knew I wanted. My father gave me this opportunity, but you helped me seize it. You stood beside me and said I should get what was rightfully mine, and you never wavered from that. How could I ever regret any of it?" Quinn pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I am the lucky one. I found my home and my purpose all in one remarkable woman." In 1890, Jake retired from active work on the ranch, though he stayed on in a small house they built for him near the main property. He spent his days teaching young Thomas and Clara everything he knew, passing on decades of ranching wisdom. Miguel took over as foreman, with Red and Joseph as his seconds. The ranch operated like a well-oiled machine, each person understanding their role and working together toward common goals. That same year, Sophia received a letter from a lawyer in Ohio, informing her that Margaret had died and that Victor, still imprisoned, wanted to see her. She showed the letter to Quinn, unsure how to respond. "You do not owe him anything," Quinn said carefully. "But if you feel you need closure, I will support whatever you decide." After much thought, Sophia wrote back declining the visit. Victor had tried to kill her, had nearly destroyed everything her father built. She felt no obligation to provide him comfort in his final years. Instead, she donated money to establish a library in Lyndon in her father's name, a positive legacy to counter Victor's bitter hatred. As the 19th century drew to a close, the Double F Ranch stood as one of the most successful operations in eastern Kansas. Sophia and Quinn had more than doubled its size, adding adjacent properties as they became available. They employed dozens of people and contributed significantly to the local economy. More importantly, they had built a reputation for fairness and integrity that echoed Thomas Finnegan's own values. Their children grew into capable young adults. Thomas, at 16, was already taking on significant responsibilities in managing the cattle operations. Clara, at 14, showed a sharp business mind that promised great things. They both planned to stay on the ranch, working together to carry forward the family legacy. One evening in the spring of 1898, Sophia and Quinn rode out to a hill overlooking the ranch, the same vantage point from which she had first seen the property 16 years earlier. So much had changed, and yet the fundamental character of the place remained the same. Honest work, good land, and people who cared about something larger than themselves. "Do you remember the day we met?" Sophia asked, her hand finding Quinn's as they sat together watching the sunset. "You pulled me behind that water trough and probably saved my life." Quinn chuckled, the sound warm and familiar. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, even covered in dust and terrified. And then you opened your mouth, all that determination and fire, and I knew you were something special." "You said I should get what was rightfully mine," Sophia recalled. "You believed in me before you even knew me." "I believed in Thomas's judgment, and once I got to know you, I believed in you for your own sake. You proved every bit as remarkable as your father claimed, and then some." Sophia leaned against her husband's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. They had built something beautiful together, a life full of purpose and love and meaning. Their children would carry it forward, and someday their grandchildren after that. "I love you, Quinn Thornton," she said softly. "Thank you for defending me, for standing beside me, for building this life with me. I love you too, Sophia Thornton, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat." They rode back to the ranch as twilight deepened toward the house where their children waited, and where decades of memories lived in every corner. The land stretched out around them, the cattle grazing peacefully, the ranch hands settling in for the evening. It was home in the truest sense, a place built on love and defended with courage, where justice had prevailed and family meant everything. Years later, when Thomas and Clara Thornton ran the ranch together as equal partners, they would tell their own children about the grandmother who fought for her inheritance, and the grandfather who said she should get what was rightfully hers. They would speak of courage and love, of standing up for what was right even when it was dangerous, and they would look out over the same land, now passed to a new generation, knowing that some legacies were worth fighting for. But that was still to come. On this spring evening in 1898, Sophia and Quinn simply held hands as they walked into their home, grateful for the journey that had brought them together and the life they had built from the ashes of tragedy. Their love story had begun with gunfire and danger, but it had grown into something solid and lasting, a partnership that proved love and determination could overcome any obstacle. The Double F Ranch stood as testament to that truth, a place where a woman had claimed her birthright and found not just inheritance but purpose, not just property but home, and not just a defender but a soulmate who believed in her completely. It was everything Thomas Finnegan had hoped for his daughter, and more than Sophia herself had dared to dream. And so they lived, working side by side through all the seasons of their lives, their love deepening with each passing year, their partnership an example to all who knew them. The cowboy who had defended her inheritance became the husband who shared her dreams, the father of her children, and the love of her life. Together, they proved that some things were worth fighting for, and that when two people truly believed in each other, there was nothing they could not accomplish. The stars came out over Kansas that night, the same stars Thomas Finnegan had once shown his daughter, connecting past to present to future. And under that vast sky, in the house they had made their own, Sophia and Quinn Thornton held each other close and counted themselves blessed beyond measure. Their story had a happy ending after all, the kind built on trust and courage and love that never wavered, no matter what challenges came their way.